fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
Mamdani defunding the police in New York City. Prince Andrew arrested in Great Britain. Kansas Republicans take a stand against their woke governor on transgender bathrooms. And Senator Osoff calls Republican voters diseased. It's Thursday, February 19th. This is Common Sense for the American People. I'm Scott Jennings, reporting here on Salem and broadcasting live today from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Thanks to our man Curtis Bush in Studio 67 for hosting the show today. And before we begin with the news, I want to offer my personal thanks to President Larry Arnn at Hillsdale College. We had an amazing event last night up on Amelia Island, Florida. A huge crowd, like 800 plus people at the Hillsdale National Leadership Seminar. I was honored to deliver the keynote speech at the dinner. I spoke about Western civilization to a university that very much teaches its students about the West, about American exceptionalism. They don't take federal money. It's just truly a great university with a terrific president, a great mission, and a great leadership team. So again, thank you to President Larry Arnn and Hillsdale for the invitation to be with you all at Amelia Island last night. On to the news now. President Trump held a meeting of his new Board of Peace this morning in Washington, D.C. Lots of speeches and some comments from the president about Iran. Let's hear that. Cut number 10.
Now is the time for Iran to join us on a path that will complete what we're doing. And if they join us, that'll be great. If they don't join us, that'll be great too. But it'll be a very different path. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen if it doesn't.
We'll talk later in the show with an Iran expert for the latest on this situation. The president is now off to Georgia. He's holding some affordability events there today. Another tragedy on Indiana roadways. Another illegal alien behind the wheel of a semi-tractor trailer. This happened in Hendricks County, Indiana, where the big truck crashed into another driver, killing him. The illegal alien in question here is from India. He was caught and released at the border in 2018. He was a minor at the time. His name is Singh Sukhdeep, and he received his CDL from the state of Indiana in May of 2025. He is now said to be in ICE custody. The BBC reports that police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former Prince Andrew, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Now, police in the UK don't normally name suspects when they are arrested, but the word is out that it is Prince Andrew. And although his name has been tossed out in regards to the Epstein files lately, this indictment apparently has nothing to do with that. It appears that he may have shared sensitive or classified information regarding trips he took as UK's special representative for international trade. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Elections have consequences filed. New York City edition, more budget news. We told you yesterday that Mamdani has proposed massive new property tax increases, and today comes word of budget cuts to the New York City Police Department. Mamdani wants to cut $22 million from the police budget and get rid of 5,000 cops in the process. Again, they spend billions on illegal immigrant services there, and they are now raising taxes on American citizens and cutting police presence in the city. And it gets worse. Listen more here to the new mayor, cut number 1.
There is a reason that we did not include these in our city's attempts to get to $5.4 billion, because these are the rating of reserves that we do not want to pursue. These are the kinds of reserves that what we would rather do is ensure that they remain as they are so that the city can be on firm financial footing. However, in order to get to this point of closing the gap on both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year, we are forced to raid the rainy day fund, the retiree health benefits trust reserve, and to increase property taxes across these other years.
Raiding surpluses, raising taxes. Also in Mamdani's budget, he's asking for $1.2 billion more for illegal immigrants. That's on top of the billions they've already spent. This is the Democratic plan, folks. Take from you, give to illegal aliens. Elections have consequences, part 2. Virginia edition. Major airplane manufacturer and defense contractor Boeing is moving its defense headquarters out of Northern Virginia and back to St. Louis, Missouri. The move comes just a few weeks after new Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger was sworn in, and she's taken a slew of anti-business positions in the process. Virginia has an anti-business governor. Missouri has a pro-growth governor, and big company there reacted accordingly. Georgia Senator John Ossoff raising eyebrows last night during an interview with Stephen Colbert. Listen to how he describes the people who voted for Donald Trump for president. Cut number 8.
Donald Trump himself is a symptom of a deeper disease in our society. I mean, how is it that a demagogue who promised to tear it all down was twice elected to the presidency on false promises?
Did you catch that? If you voted for Donald Trump, you are a diseased part of American society. And you know what they do to diseases? They must be cured or cut out and discarded. Pretty dark stuff, folks, coming from someone that many Democrats will tout for president should he win re-election in Georgia for Senate this year. Out in Oregon, a dangerous illegal alien off the streets. Let's hear cut number 3.
U.S. Marshals say that they've arrested a member of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua in Hillsborough. Today, they found and arrested Jesus Lopez Gonzalez while he was walking to a store, calling him a fugitive associated with the gang, which the Trump administration has designated as a terrorist organization. He now faces federal charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking. This arrest is part of a broader operation targeting a 27-member splinter faction of Tren de Aragua known as Anti-Tren. Anyone with information on wanted fugitives is urged to contact the nearest U.S. Marshal's office. The one in Portland is downtown in Courthouse Square.
Fox 12 TV out in Oregon there on the story. It does seem that having federal immigration enforcement is a good thing. It does make your community safer. Staying out west and picking up on some reporting in the New York Post here. Federal authorities are opening a major investigation into alleged unemployment insurance fraud in California. The U.S. Department of Labor is sending a strike team to examine financial issues and potential fraud within the state's unemployment insurance program, saying previous officials turned a blind eye to major problems. The review comes amid long-standing concerns about billions of dollars in improper payments in California's system dating back to the COVID-19 pandemic. This could lead to criminal referrals. We're going to keep an eye on this one. Seoul, South Korea, international news. The former president there, Yoon Suk Yeol, was found guilty of leading an insurrection on Thursday and sentenced to life in prison for his brief imposition of martial law back in 2024. The former president was ousted after he declared martial law and sent troops to surround the National Assembly on December 3rd, 2024, in a somewhat strange attempt to overcome a legislature that was controlled by his political opponents. This is the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. Common sense for the American people. Have a quick word from our friends at Relief Factor. You know, we've been surveying customers of Relief Factor from around the country. We're getting all sorts of reports in from around the country. And I'll pass along a listener note that I thought was worth sharing with all of you. This one actually coming from back home in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. 87-year-old Eileen is the author of this report. She says there was a point where walking had become really difficult, and she thought, you know, this is just part of getting older. Then she tried Relief Factor. Now Eileen tells us she's walking again. She's even dancing around to music on her television. Her words to us were simple. She has no pain. She started out taking 3 packages of Relief Factor a day. Now she's down to 2. And she says Relief Factor has made a huge difference in her life. That's what people are looking for in a product like this. Not hype, but rather real improvement. Improvement like what we've heard described here by 87-year-old Eileen from Kentucky. Give you a little personal testimonial. We've been trying Relief Factor since last summer in the Jennings household. I've tried it. Other members of my household have tried it. My father has been extremely enthusiastic about the impacts of Relief Factor. Getting around pretty well. He's spending some of the winter in Florida playing golf. Very active man with his friends. He's no spring chicken, but he's hopping around like one. If you'd like some options here on dealing with pain, my advice, call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself, how will it feel to be out of pain? When we come back, Kansas Republicans strike a blow for common sense and they fight back against the state's woke governor. More on that when we come back. Stay with us.
Hey, Scott, listen, when I prep for my CNN debates, I need to know exactly where the national conversation is headed. And it turns out it's helpful to know that in your everyday life as well. And that's why I tried out Free Spoke. Now, it's my go-to place for search and for news. When you use Free Spoke, it's a search platform that gives you the full story. You get information from the left, you get it from the right, you get non-mainstream, you get independent journalists, you get podcast insights. What you get from Free Spoke is the full story all in one place. And here's the thing, when you search on Free Spoke, you know they are not going to sell your data. It's quite something, actually. It's fast, it's private, it's unbiased. Free Spoke helps me research topics and make sure that I understand the full picture. You can have this tool as well. Just go to freespoke.com/Jennings to download their app for free. And as an exclusive for my listeners, use promo code Jennings after you download it and get 35% off the premium version. You go ad-free and you unlock deeper elite tools to have control over your information. So don't rely on incomplete information. Take control of your own information environment. See every perspective so you can think for yourself, just like I do before every debate.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come. The Scott Jennings Show.
It is Thursday, February 19th, and we go now to Kansas, where Republicans in the state legislature have struck a blow for common sense. The legislature had passed a bill requiring people to use the bathroom of their gender at birth and to identify as their God-given gender on things like driver's licenses. The Democratic governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, vetoed this bill, but last night Republicans overrode the veto. Joining me now, Representative Susan Humphrey. She's the chair of the Judiciary Committee there in Kansas, and she is live here on the Scott Jennings Show. Representative Humphreys, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. Tell us what happened. You all took up some legislation, and it passed overwhelmingly, but the governor saw it differently. Give us some backstory on the bill here.
Yes, so it had two parts. One part was your driver's license and birth certificate has to correspond to your sex at birth. And then the second part had to do with government buildings. The buildings had to have a designation, men's and women's rooms, and needed to enforce that. And so we put it all together and passed it overwhelmingly, and then the governor vetoed it, and we were able to override it in the Senate on Tuesday and then in the House yesterday with our supermajorities.
Got to tell you, this seems like a pretty fairly common sense thing to do. Why would the governor of a state like Kansas, which is a pretty conservative place, be against passing this legislation?
You know, Scott, it's crazy to us. It seems like this is so logical and normal. It is about safety for girls in locker rooms, for women to feel comfortable in their private spaces especially. And we just got such backlash and crazy objections on why this is a horrible bill and it's discriminatory and, you know, it's not good for people. It's not good for Kansans. But we are just going back to what is the norm, that people use the restroom of their, as you said, God-given sex.
One of the Democratic state senators here, David Haley of Kansas City, called the legislation discriminatory. But I have to ask you, Representative Humphreys, isn't it discriminatory towards women to allow men to come into their bathrooms and come into their locker rooms?
Yes, 100%. And we have to think about what's right for we could say 50% of the population, the women, or really 99% of the population, men and women, who just want to have private spaces. So it's not discriminating. We are just focused on helping people feel comfortable, safe, and not threatened.
Do you anticipate that there will be agitators here who try to violate the law, which I should note, if you violate it now, you face up to $1,000 in fines and potential criminal charges. Do you think there will be people who try to make a case out of this?
Well, I think it'll definitely go to court. We're anticipating that for sure. And, a couple of weeks ago, we did have a situation in the Capitol where came in on noon on a Friday and everyone was going to go in the wrong bathrooms just to make a point. And I don't think that's endearing to people. I don't think that's a good way to get their point across. But, we anticipate there'll be it'll be taken to court.
Talk to me about the documents here. So if you get a driver's license or another kind of government ID or government document, you have to identify as the gender of your birth. Are people in Kansas right now, is there a population of people who are holding government documents that misidentify them, and are those documents now invalid? I guess they'll have to go get new documents?
Yeah, that is true. There have been people who have changed those markers on their driver's license, and they will be noticed. They will get a notice that they have to go back, and they have to change it back to what it was at birth. So, that's where, and it's a reason. It's about safety. We had in the committee hearing, we had law enforcement say we need to know what gender people are. Medical professionals testify we need to know. When we're treating people, we need to know. This is safety for them too.
Absolutely. Well, I think if you can erase someone's gender, then you can erase a gender from the law, and that's what's happening to women here in the United States of America on issues like this. But I'd like to congratulate you and the Republicans in the Kansas legislature for striking a blow for common sense. That's Representative Susan Humphreys, chair of the Judiciary Committee from Kansas. Thanks for being on the show today.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks for joining us. One quick word for you about our cruise. It's the big Gulf of America cruise coming up in November 2026. That's this year. Mike Gallagher and I, we're going on a big cruise, a big ship, big conversations, big ideas. We would like you to join us. You're not going to want to miss it. Turquoise waters, white sand beaches, great food, great conversation. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit ScottJenningsShow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. More on breaking news and everything else going on when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
The man who made CNN safe for conservatives again. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Thursday, February 19th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here on Salem, broadcasting from our home away from home here in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. It seems like that lately. We've been down here in South Florida quite a bit. There's quite a bit going on in the news, and to kick around quite a bit of it, joining me is the politics editor of the Free Press and formerly a member of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, Mene Ukabarua. Mene, welcome to the Scott Jennings Show, your inaugural appearance here on Common Sense for the American People. We're glad to have you.
Thanks so much, Scott. Great to be here.
Yeah, Mene, we're glad to have this conversation. And I should start by saying I consult with the Free Press every day. If you don't, out there in Radio Land, I encourage that you look it up. A lot of times people ask me, what do you read? What do you consume to get ready for your show? And CNN hits every day. And the Free Press is certainly one of those sources that I consult. Let's start with New York City. I know this is on your mind, Mene. What do you think about Mamdani right now? He's rolled out his budget. He's got a tax increase proposal, pretty massive property tax increase proposal. He's got a proposal to cut money from the New York City Police Department, among other things. Give us your analysis of Mamdani's budget and his first several weeks on the job.
Yeah, well, it's pretty incredible to behold. I mean, he has been in office for all of a month and a half and is already saying, we don't have nearly enough money to do all of the things that I want to do and was elected to do. New York has one of the wealthiest tax bases in the country. They are able to raise massive amounts of income tax, massive amounts of corporate tax. They spend a ton of money also. And yet, instead of thinking, where can I cut, except from police, he basically says, we need to raise taxes massively in order to pass through my social spending. So he has a plan A. The plan A is raise the taxes on billionaires. Never mind the fact that the top 1% already pays almost 50% of all the tax in New York City. He thinks that's not high enough. We need to go another 2%. He also wants to raise taxes on companies. And he says, if the state doesn't allow him to do that, I'm going to raise taxes on regular homeowners, about 10% taxes for people who are living in Queens, people who are living in the Bronx. Ordinary middle-class people are going to have to pay to fund Mamdani's socialist agenda. So there's no way to get around it. He basically says, if you live in this city, your costs are going to go up.
Talk to us about the politics in New York. You mentioned Plan A, so Mamdani is asking the legislature and the governor to implement this wealth tax. They may not do that, so Plan B is to go to this 10% property tax increase. Talk to us a little bit about the internal politics there, even amongst the Democrats in New York. How are they reacting to Mamdani's demands?
Yeah, so Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of New York, has ruled out in past years the idea of raising income taxes any further. Not because she's opposed to high taxes per se, but just because of how much they've been raised just in the past decade. New York has one of the highest income taxes already, and she knows that these very high earners have the ability to move if they think the tax rate has gotten out of hand, which many of them do. So she says, I'm not going to raise it. And yet Mamdani basically says, New Yorkers have elected me to do things like pass free childcare, to do things like free buses, all of these things that I'm going to need the state in order to be able to put into action. And so he says, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you go along and increase that income tax and increase the corporate tax, or I'm going to be left with no choice but to increase property taxes, which he does have the authority to do. And because Hochul herself is running for re-election later this year, she is afraid that Mamdani is going to be able to whip up progressives to oppose her unless she goes along with his demands. So we'll see whether she stands strong or whether Mamdani has the upper hand because he has so much support from the Democratic Party's progressive base.
How do you think average New Yorkers are reacting so far? There was a big snowstorm, and the snow was on the ground for quite a while. I was up in New York, I got to tell you. It was hard to get around. There was garbage all over the place. You have that. You have these tax increase proposals. We had, I think, 20 homeless people die in that frigid weather because Mamdani wouldn't do the homeless encampment sweeps. How do you think average New Yorkers are reacting to him so far?
Yeah, I think that snowstorm definitely did a lot to discredit him really early on. It was kind of exemplary of the way that progressives and socialists sometimes approach governance, which is that he's focused on all these huge reform ideas. I'm going to put in free grocery stores. I'm going to have free childcare. When ordinary people think government should at least focus first on the basics. Let's get the roads cleared. Let's get the sidewalks cleared so I'm not tripping over myself just trying to get to my job. And the fact that he wasn't able to do that. I think people understand it's a big blizzard. It takes a certain amount of time to get everything you need in order. But the fact that that snow was still on the ground and blocking sidewalks for weeks, I think made a lot of people realize this guy isn't serious. He has no governing experience, isn't ready for prime time early on. And so we're probably only going to see more examples of that, kind of overlooking the basics like keeping homeless people off the streets because he's so focused on things like the tax rates and trying to pass these big programs into law.
That voice you're hearing on the Scott Jennings Show is Mene Ukubarua. He is the politics editor of the Free Press. Mene, you wrote a piece recently called Trump Didn't Lose in Minnesota. Let's go back to Minnesota and discuss the aftermath of the immigration wars there. What was the theory of your piece?
Yeah, the theory was that I think a lot of people watched the tragedy that took place in Minnesota, where you had these confrontations between federal immigration authorities and people, where you ended up having these shootings, and that was followed by a pullback of ICE. And so it looked like, wow, this is a big defeat for Donald Trump. But I think that we have to separate the politics of what happened in Minnesota from the policy. On the politics, if you look at the polls, it was a big defeat for Trump. The vast majority of Americans think ICE went too far in some of the tactics that it was using in its deportation campaign. They think that the Department of Homeland Security didn't react well to these shootings. But if you look at the policy, even though they have reduced the number of ICE agents in Minneapolis, the reason that they did that is because finally you got some cooperation from state and local authorities in terms of cooperating with deporting criminal migrants. So when Tom Homan, who's Trump's border czar, went into Minnesota, he said, we are willing, in fact, we're ready to withdraw some of our agents from Minneapolis after this surge took place. But we're going to do that as long as we know that we're going to have access to the jails so that we can find the people who have committed violent crimes, people who are illegally in this country, and be able to deport them. Previously, that hadn't been the case. A lot of the counties, like Hennepin County, where Minneapolis is, were not allowing ICE agents to get that information and get that access, but they were able to come to an agreement where they say, we're not going to flood your streets with federal immigration authorities, but we're going to make sure that we're able to identify the most dangerous people who are in your custody so that we can remove them. So that means going forward, people in Minnesota are going to be much safer than they previously were from this illegal immigrant crime. And I think that was the ultimate goal that the Trump administration had in the first place.
Yeah, Homan made a huge difference here. I mean, from the beginning of this, all the White House ever said was, if you would cooperate with us and let us into the jails, we wouldn't have to send nearly as many people there. If we have to chase them through the neighborhoods and out into the communities, we've got to send people. And then when you have these radical agitators out, we have to send people to protect our people. That was really part of the buildup. But Homan went there and did a job. I suspect the White House has taken note of this. Do you foresee more adventures like this or more responsibilities like this for Tom Homan, a troubleshooter perhaps being sent around the country to solve similar issues in other places?
I think so. Yeah, I think that President Trump is aware that Tom Homan is the best card in his deck in terms of actually handling immigration and deportations responsibly. And that there are a lot of places where you do have criminal migrants who are in these jails being arrested and then released back out into the public. This is something that's very unpopular among Americans. And if Tom Homan is the person who can go and speak with a Democratic mayor, with sheriffs in some of these blue cities and states and say, you want to get these people off of your streets and let's come to an agreement to make sure that we can do that in a safe and responsible way, I do think that he's going to see some progress there. So hopefully Minneapolis can kind of create a template for more cooperation between the Trump administration and some of these blue states on this issue.
Mene Ukabarua is the politics editor of the Free Press. Mene, let's talk a little national politics, and we'll zoom down to Texas. I'm fascinated by this Democratic primary for United States Senate. You have James Tallarico versus Jasmine Crockett. For all of 2025, Jasmine Crockett was kind of the most visible Democrat out there. She is in the House. She jumps into the Senate race. Tallarico is who all the establishment Democrats in Washington would like to have. It appears they are really doing everything they can to boost Tallarico, and he and Stephen Colbert this week cooked up this whole hoax about the idea that Donald Trump was trying to prohibit Tallarico's interview on Colbert's show from airing because of the FCC. This was all a huge lie, but it's all being done to the detriment of Crockett, who's pretty mad about the whole thing. How did all this strike you, and do you have any idea who's winning right now? I've seen some polls with Crockett ahead. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I think you're totally right. Jasmine Crockett had the bigger profile at the beginning of this fight. She's kind of in that AOC wing of the Democratic Party in the House, which is very, very anti-Trump, very, very willing to draw attention to herself in any way possible, and had a lot of support from Democrats who basically just want to not only beat Trump, but to offend him, to basically be shocking in the approach that they take to opposing Donald Trump and the Republican Party. But there is a huge movement of Democrats who have been convinced that they can flip Texas, which is a deeply red state, if they just find the right polished figure to represent their brand to the center of the state. and Tallarico fits that mold exactly. This is a guy who is deeply Christian. I believe his father is a pastor, grew up in a fairly rural part of Texas, is able to speak, they believe, to a kind of moderate, more traditionally inclined Texas voter than Jasmine Crockett really would be. So we've seen this massive surge of resources from establishment Democrats in Texas and from the entire country in terms of funding Tallarico, trying to promote him. And frankly, it seems to be working. If you look at the most recent polls, he has been climbing and climbing as more people realize who he is, as he's able to get himself on the TV screen much more. And it does look to me as if he's going to pull ahead in the primary that's coming up next month.
Mene Ukabarua is the politics editor of the Free Press. Great job. We'll have you back soon, Mene, and keep watching your reporting in the Free Press. A word from our friends at Patriot Mobile. I cannot recommend them highly enough. Not only do they deliver premium cell service on all 3 major U.S. networks, they also invest in your values. So you get a great cell phone company that does what you want, unlimited data, mobile hotspots, international roaming. And you know that when you pay your bill, some of that money is going right back into the causes that you care about. Switching is easier than ever. Activate in minutes. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade, whatever you want. But take a stand today. Go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT and use promo code Scott for a free month of service. It's patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. I encourage you to make the switch today. It's common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is on Salem. We'll have more after this. Stay with us.
Freedom to speak clearly with no leftist lunacy. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is with you here on Salem. Mentioned at the top of the show last night, I was with the great people of Hillsdale College for a wonderful event last night. Met a lot of great people from all over the country who support the Hillsdale mission. So that's one kind of college experience. I want to talk to you about a completely different kind of college experience. If it feels like 2016 all over again, you might be right. Once again, college campuses are not a safe space for anyone who does not cave to the woke mob. A lecture featuring Barry Weiss, who is the new editor-in-chief of CBS and the founder of the aforementioned Free Press. A lecture she was going to give at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, was canceled on the university's events page this week as the university faced protests to cancel the appearance. A petition calling for the event to be canceled gathered nearly 11,000 signatures. So a person who holds a high position of authority in American journalism cannot go to UCLA and give a lecture, according to 11,000 people who signed a petition and according to the university leadership. The event was part of the Daniel Pearl Memorial Lecture Series. You remember Daniel Pearl? He was the Wall Street Journal reporter who was kidnapped and murdered in Pakistan in 2002. I will never, ever forget that story. So they have this lecture to honor the memory of Daniel Pearl. And they invite Barry Weiss, who's Jewish. And now she can't go. The cancellation followed weeks of criticism and planned protests from student and activist groups. Code Pink, our friends at Code Pink, they publicly called on UCLA to rescind the invitation, arguing Weiss's views are, quote, inconsistent with the values of the lecture series. Her views? What are Barry Weiss's views? That we should have non- or unbiased journalism? That we should provide platforms for all different kinds of people to speak their minds? That people should be able to practice their faith, their Jewish faith, without being attacked violently or harassed? Those are Barry Weiss's views. But according to Code Pink, that's inconsistent with the values of the lecture series. This is the same Code Pink, by the way, that the State Department recently identified as a cutout for Chinese influence operations. These professional agitators, along with left-wing nuts like Hassan Piker, have spent weeks out at UCLA trying to get this event canceled. Let's listen to Cut 11 here.
Hi, are you Hassan?
Thank you so much.
Yes. We're trying to get Barry Weiss canceled. Thank you so much.
I love you guys so much.
Yeah.
Barry Weiss is back canceled.
Yeah, at UCLA.
Hell yeah. Fuck Barry Weiss.
Yeah, exactly.
These are all the words amazing. Thank you so much.
Very disgusting. These deranged old liberal boomers have lost their absolute minds. These Code Pink people working for the Communist Chinese to try to stop things like a lecture at UCLA. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, if they will cancel someone like Barry Weiss, who, by the way, is not a conservative, okay? She is a center-left, kind of publicly identified center-left sort of person. Call it middle of the road if you want. Her great sin is that she thinks, hey, journalism should be unbiased, that it should give you the facts, that it should not put its thumb on the scale, and then when we're covering American politics, that we should listen to people from across the spectrum. This is Barry Weiss's great sin. And for this, the Communist Chinese puppets at Code Pink and all the other liberals who signed the petition want to cancel her from going to the UCLA. Now, UCLA, you might remember, recently distinguished itself as one of the most anti-Semitic campuses during the Free Palestine frenzy. It was at UCLA where they were setting up zones, checking people's IDs, not allowing Jewish students to pass through. The campus got in huge trouble for this. If you're out in California and you're thinking about sending your kid to UCLA, understand what you're dealing with out there. It's pretty ugly stuff. But I would go to a lecture from Barry Weiss. She's one of the most fascinating people in American media and in American journalism today. It's UCLA's loss, in my opinion. Another hour of the Scott Jennings Show is ahead. It's common sense for the American people. We're glad you're here. Breaking news to come. Stay with us.
If the leftists haven't had enough yet, there's more. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Here we go. Hour number 2 underway. Common sense for the American people on Thursday, February 19th. Scott Jennings with you here, broadcasting live from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida today. Quick check of the headlines. The Chicago Bears may soon be the Indiana Bears. Indiana lawmakers announced today they are in the process of hammering out a deal to potentially move the team from Chicago into the state of Indiana. And the Bears have given a statement signaling their vision to build a stadium in Hammond, Indiana. This was during a meeting by the Indiana House Ways and Means Committee, which unanimously passed a proposed amendment to Indiana Senate Bill 27 that names Hammond as the location for a new Bears stadium. Here's the commentary from the team. The passage of SB 27 would mark the most meaningful step forward in our stadium planning efforts to date. We are committed to finishing the remaining site-specific necessary due diligence to support our vision to build a world-class stadium near the Wolf Lake area in Hammond. The bill still has to pass the full Indiana House, but how bad of governance do you have to have in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, to lose the Chicago Bears to the state of Indiana? Must be pretty bad. Breaking news out of Florida. The Florida State House just voted for a constitutional amendment in the Sunshine State abolishing all non-school property taxes for Florida homeowners. It would be put on the ballot for voters in 2026 if approved by the state Senate. Vote count there was 80-30. This hour, President Trump traveling in Georgia. We're paying attention to the president's movements. If he makes any comments, we'll bring those to you today. Another crazy illegal alien story you won't believe. It's the Department of Homeland Security telling us they've arrested a Liberian illegal alien who was working as a Minnesota corrections officer while also being AWOL from the Pennsylvania National Guard, also while masquerading as a U.S. citizen despite having no legal status in the United States. Federal government says 45-year-old Morris Brown was identified as part of the major fraud investigation going on in Minnesota. Oh, there's more. Mr. Brown is also alleged to have committed marriage fraud and made repeated false claims to U.S. immigration authorities. And the partial government shutdown continues. Democrats don't want to fund the Department of Homeland Security right now over immigration enforcement, even though ICE is funded for the next couple of years already. But they have shut down the rest of the agency anyway, and we would like to talk about the consequences of that. Joining me is Steve Kirby. Steve serves on President Trump's Homeland Security Advisory Council. He was the 35th Lieutenant Governor of South Dakota. Steve, welcome to the Scott Jennings Show. We're glad you're here. First of all, tell us, what is the Homeland Security Advisory Council? What is it that you do for the White House and for the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, Scott, thank you for having me on. The Homeland Security Advisory Council is just that. We advise Secretary Noem and her staff regarding any one of the 23 different agencies that are under Homeland Security. So, for instance, one very important topic that's very public is what are the chances of the system running the Eastern Seaboard electrical grid being hacked? And how can we put up walls against that? So that's one of many. We've been hopefully helpful with immigration, with TSA, and making that more user friendly. And for instance, you don't take your shoes off anymore. That was something that the advisory council was big on. So there's different items for 23 agencies. There's always something going on, Scott.
Yeah, it sounds like it, although I have to take issue with the shoes. My boots still set off the alarms about half the time. I may need to send you a letter about that, Steve. We'll talk about that off the air. Let's talk about the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. ICE is funded. That's not going to come to a stop. But there's other agencies at DHS that are impacted by this government shutdown, TSA being one of them. Are we in danger of TSA agents here not being paid and therefore possibly not coming to work? Are we going to see travel snafus like we saw last year when the government was shut down?
Unfortunately, you are 100% right. We will pretty soon be seeing TSA employees who are very dedicated and generally very high efficiency, but seeing them ask for furloughs because they will not be getting any money. They won't be paid. And many of them seek a furlough so they can go out and get a job to help with the rent, the utilities, the basic ingredients of life. It's a sick example is there's a TSA, I'll leave him unnamed, TSA employee in Minneapolis whose wife was on a $1,200 a month cancer treatment. He was laid off, or not laid off, but no money. He went out and got a second job as a welder. We had a TSA employee in Houston who slept in his car because he couldn't afford housing. We had another TSA employee who's had 13 kids, 7 of whom were still at home, and they're on the food shelf, as is the fellow with the wife with cancer. They go to the food shelves. They were getting donations from friends, but it's very real. Scott, I when studying for this presentation, I was reminded of a saying that 90% of Americans are 2 paychecks away from United Way. And you go to the Coast Guard, as I did as a guest of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in January. Scott, they're kids. They're 25 years old. They don't have any savings. Every dime they get, they're paying their mortgage, their motorcycle payment, whatever.
So we've got TSA on the brink of a situation where they won't be paid. That'll have travel impacts. And I guess we'll go back through the same thing with air traffic control as well. And we're going through this with Coast Guard. There's really no end in sight. Do you have any political projections about whether the Democrats are planning to ever give in on this nonsense?
Well, the crazy thing is they pulled this, as we all know, a few months ago, and what was it, 35, 40 days of being practically entire federal world being shut down. They probably think it's easier with one little Homeland Security entity with its member organizations to politically. Fewer and fewer people will see that because it won't have a big impact on life. But you get a scare with cybersecurity who cannot keep up with their technology and invest in it and pay for it because they don't have the money. And you get something that happens there that goes right to the spinal cord, right to the backbone of America. Well, they'll have hell to pay with the voters.
Yeah, it's that was 43 days of a shutdown last year, and one of the biggest impacts was on travel. We had massive ripple effects throughout the travel system. Airports were having major delays. People couldn't get where they wanted to go. People were stranded. And, these poor workers are caught in the middle of all this, and they've not done anything wrong. Steve Kirby, thanks for joining us. We'll keep in touch with you as this Department of Homeland Security shutdown, the Democrat-caused shutdown, lingers on. It's Scott Jennings here on Salem. Common Sense for the American people. Another story that you need to hear about Relief Factor. Rod in Texas, 64 years old, he tells us, I used to build houses on the side, and years of hard physical work left me with excruciating back pain that became unbearable. I finally gave Relief Factor a try, and within 4 days, most of the pain subsided. Over the next few weeks, it continued to improve. Rod's words, and I quote, being pain-free is indescribable, end quote. We are getting all of these stories from around the country, from people like Rod in Texas, who say, I had pain, I tried Relief Factor, now the pain is gone. It is as simple as that. That could be you, and if you want it to be you, my advice is try the 3-week quick start and see if it works. 3 weeks, what do you have to lose? Nothing, really. 1-800-4RELIEF or go to ReliefFactor.com. 1-800-4RELIEF or go to ReliefFactor.com. How would it feel to be out of pain? Find out with Relief Factor. More to come. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
When he's not in the Oval Office or owning the libs on CNN, he's here with us. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Thursday, February 19th. Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings here. And here is some uncommon nonsense out of Detroit, Michigan. We've got another police department apparently at odds with the idea of cooperating with federal authorities, and the leadership of this police department would rather fire police officers for doing their jobs and keeping you safe than support them. Here's what happened. 2 officers with the Detroit Police Department, one a patrol officer and the other a sergeant, made contact with U.S. Customs and Border Protection during separate traffic stops. In both cases, Border Patrol ended up detaining the individuals involved in being pulled over. One of the calls was made because the motorist did not speak English. The officer was asking CBP for help to translate. The other call was made after an officer investigating a felony warrant believed the person might be in the country unlawfully. I mean, these seem like totally normal police interactions to me. But here's the part that's going to shock you. Detroit Police Chief Todd Bettison, instead of praising these officers for protecting the people in Detroit, is trying to fire them. He has suspended them and requested that the police commission fire them for violating department policy that prohibits coordination with federal immigration enforcement. And if you think this sounds like some local issue, think again, because one of Detroit's own members of Congress, Representative Rashida Tlaib, has publicly come out to support the firing of these officers. She says that to maintain community trust, we have to fire the cops who are reaching out to federal immigration authorities. Let that sink in for a moment. In order to maintain community trust, Rashida Tlaib says we got to get rid of the cops who want to do anything at all about illegal immigration. Now, she is a sitting member of Congress. It's her duty to look out for all American citizens, but she's now cheering on the dismissal of police officers who tried to do what their oath of office calls for, to enforce the law, protect and serve. The police chief, Bettison, and defenders of this policy say the police department is, quote, not in the immigration business, and that contacting Border Patrol, even for translation help, undermines their goals. How is that possible? Why would it undermine your goals as a local police department to be able to understand someone that you pulled over, or to get a felon who's in the country illegally off the streets? If your goal is to keep the streets safe, seems to me talking to someone in the language they can understand or getting a felon off the roadway would be a good thing. I guess Chief Bettison disagrees. But we really ought to be honest about what's happening here. We have political leadership in agencies and in Congress and in localities that are putting anti-American ideology ahead of public safety. Instead of backing police officers who encounter possible federal violations and making the call that any objective police leader could, should, or would make, Detroit's leadership is scolding and disciplining these officers, trying to fire them. This kind of stupidity is what led to the chaos in Minnesota. Local officials want to make a political point instead of support law enforcement, and it led to weeks of chaos, unnecessary chaos. When did it become wrong to enforce the law by contacting federal authorities when you believe or know the law is being broken? When did this become a fireable offense for a police officer, like it apparently is in Detroit? Who benefits from this? Do taxpayers benefit? Do American citizens benefit? No. Illegal immigrants benefit. And if they know in Detroit you can go there and really not have to face any consequences from the local police, well, they're going to go to Detroit. That's what's going to happen. If you're in Detroit, call up your city council, call up the mayor, call up the chief, call somebody. We've got 2 cops objectively doing their jobs to protect and serve, whose jobs are on the line. What's happening to them is atrocious. There needs to be accountability for the people who are trying to fire them. It is at odds with public safety. And this is not isolated. This kind of horrific leadership is, could be, will be happening in cities across the country. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Common sense for the American people. More news after this. Thanks for joining us. Please stay with us.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Breaking news into the Scott Jennings Show here on Thursday, February 19th. A judge in Virginia has just issued an emergency injunction halting voting on the referendum to redraw Virginia's congressional maps. This is per WVTF News over there. You might recall that Democrat Governor Spanberger, the new governor, is attempting to redraw the maps to eliminate 4 Republicans from Congress. So if these maps were to be enacted, the congressional delegation in Virginia would go to 10 Democrat to just 1 Republican. But the breaking news is a judge has issued an emergency injunction against voting on that referendum. So we'll keep an eye on what's going on with Virginia redistricting. We're here on the Scott Jennings Show, common sense for the American people, and we are over a year into Trump 2.0. And despite executive orders and lots of new laws, the ghost of Joe Biden still haunts us in one key area. On the line with me to discuss that is Tony Woodleaf. He is the author of several books and a writer whose work often appears in the Wall Street Journal, National Review, and other publications. He is Senior Executive Vice President at the State Policy Network's Center for Practical Federalism. He provides some of the sharpest social commentary out there, and he's here to talk about Biden-era transgender policies that are still stubbornly hanging around. Tony Woodleaf, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Glad to be here, Scott.
All right, you're doing research. Now, Joe Biden spent a lot of time over 4 years trying to implement transgender policies throughout our culture, throughout our government structures, DEI policies, all sorts of things. And of course, when Donald Trump came into office, he immediately tried to reverse course and get rid of all these things. But getting things out of the bureaucracy is very difficult to do. Tell us what your research has found out there.
Well, sure. So what happens is you'll have a president, administration. They'll issue all these directives and rules, and often those rules are aimed at state government or local schools. And so in this case, one of the areas that they targeted, believe it or not, is state 4-H programs, which are designed to give young people exposure to agricultural things. And my kids learned how to shoot through a 4-H program. It's just a great, long-standing program. It's administered through state land grant colleges, universities, public universities. So it's funded from USDA. And so what happened under the Biden administration, in addition to all these other areas, focused on race equity and DEI and everything else, was they told all the state 4-H directors, look, if you have a man who now identifies as a woman and he has been one of your camp counselors or volunteers, well, you have to treat him like he's a woman. That means if you've got a summer camp, right, where you've got boys bunking in the boys' bunks and girls bunking in the girls' bunks, well, this man who is now a woman, he gets to bunk with the girls because he's a woman. And so the state pushed back. In fact, most people didn't know this was happening. Parents didn't know about it. Lawmakers didn't know about it in the states. And this became the new policy. Now, of course, when Donald Trump came into office, they rescinded that kind of nonsense immediately. But that doesn't mean that every state just stops doing it. And we see this as a pattern with a lot of policies that came out of the Obama White House and out of the Biden White House, is they get undone by the next president. But you've got all these state agencies and state level bureaucrats, either they like them or they didn't get the memo that they should stop doing them, but they persist in state regulations. And so while most state 4-H programs, they no longer say on their website, well, we're just going to respect whatever you, the adult, says is your gender identity, some still do, and others just won't answer questions about whether they are continuing this policy. So our message to state lawmakers in particular is, you've got to take a close look at all the ways that your state agencies and your universities bend over backwards every time some White House bureaucrat or federal agency bureaucrat tells them what to do. You've got to look at whether they're complying and step in, because all of these directives, they're not binding legally. What happens is state agencies, universities, they bend over backwards because they're afraid of losing that federal money. And that's where the lawmakers have to honestly do a better job of leading. And so that's one of the things we look at is the transgender stuff, but we see it in a lot of other areas too.
Yeah, you're raising some interesting questions here about oversight. You have this rulemaking or these directives that come down from the federal government, and so people start doing things, or they're supposed to stop doing things. But ultimately, somebody has to pay attention to it, whether that's, somebody at USDA or somebody at the state level or just, a citizen who somehow is in contact with these things. Somebody has to pay attention to it, and if nobody pays attention to it, then these things inside these deep bureaucracies just have a momentum of their own, and they persist, and they go on and on and on forever.
That's right. What we found, for example, we worked with lawmakers in the state of Tennessee because they had been told by their state Department of Education officials that they had to go along with all this transgender stuff and some other things the Biden White House was pushing, or else they were going to lose all their education dollars. Well, that was just flat out not true. But the lawmakers had been told this by their state education department officials. So when we went in and talked with them and explained the reality to them, they passed a law. And the law said, from now on, State Department of Education, if you get any paperwork from the White House, from the Federal Department of Education, from any federal agency telling you how to run our schools, you have to hand that paper over to us, and we'll take a look at it. The state of Utah did the same thing for all their state agencies. They said, from now on, we're going to stand between our state agencies and our public programs for our people in our state. We're going to stand between those things that belong to us and the federal government. And our message is every state legislature ought to do the same thing, because a lot of what happens is federal bureaucrats decide they know best how you should live in your community, and then they issue these directives to state bureaucrats, and those state bureaucrats, for whatever reason, maybe it's ideological affinity, maybe it's fear of losing money, maybe they're worried they're going to go to jail somehow, they just roll over and comply. And so our point of view is state legislatures, this is their doggone job, to defend the people of their state.
That's a voice you're hearing there is Tony Woodleaf with the State Policy Network. Tony, I want to go to Oregon. You have highlighted extensive fraud within Oregon's Medicaid program. And I'm going to read this, including an adult daycare taking its developmentally disabled clients to strip clubs and bars on the taxpayer dime, millions of dollars going to an organization which housed a Venezuelan gang member, and money going towards transgender operations for children. Doesn't sound like things are going very well in Oregon. How extensive is the Medicaid fraud in Oregon, Tony?
Well, this is another example. Like, we won't know until their legislature gets in the game, right? This is their job, is to look into this. And whether you're liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. You should agree that those dollars that are allocated to take care of the least among us should go to the intended beneficiary. And the problem, of course, with this fraud is that isn't happening. And then the example you mentioned of the developmentally disabled young people being taken to strip joints, well, that's just absolute abuse. It's abuse, and it should be stopped. And so that's where you count on your state legislatures to do the right thing. And I will point out one other thing about Oregon, going back to the 4-H example. They're one of the few states that still brazenly advertises on their website. Now, of course, they may take it down as soon as this airs, but they advertise on their website that for their adult volunteers and staff members in the 4-H program, they accept whatever they claim their gender identity is. And so once again, if you're a parent with children in that program, you face the reality that your daughter, your little girl, may end up in the bunkhouse with some grown man who says he's a woman, or with some large adult male, who claims he's a girl. And so that's, I would think almost every parent in this country would disagree with that as a policy. And yet the state of Oregon, they seem to have a different belief.
Oh, vast majority of people would disagree with that. But the problem is you've got a number of radical activists who hold positions of authority, or who have at least influenced people in positions of authority to sort of join the wrong side of this 95-5 issue out there. Let's talk a little bit more about these topics. President Trump, as you mentioned, has signed some executive orders on this. There have been some laws passed. Has the federal government done enough? Are they doing enough to try to make clear what the policy directives now are? Or is there more that needs to be done in Washington to sort of either give additional direction or at least bring some of these things to light?
Well, so principled conservatives are always going to be in a bind here, because our philosophy is it's not the job of Washington, D.C. to administer our local schools. And so I think the Trump administration has by and large done the right thing. They've ended this Biden nonsense. But then it goes over to state attorneys general and state legislatures and governors to finish the job. So another example, the Biden White House really demanded strenuously, they wanted to see racial equity in school discipline outcomes. They didn't want to see any difference across races in the rates of suspension or expulsion. And so what happened was a lot of school districts they stopped doing discipline at all, because then you get everybody's the same, right?
Wait. So you're saying that the Biden White House wanted schools to essentially cook the books to equalize outcomes, statistical outcomes in the schools by race? So they were effectively asking for statistical fraud? Is that what you're saying?
That's what they didn't ask for it directly. What they said is, if we see differences in your rates of expulsion and suspension between races of students, we're going to assume racial discrimination is the only reason that could be happening. And we may or may not drop a whole platoon of DOJ attorneys onto your school district, label you a racist, investigate you until you're out of money. So what do you think school districts did? They just started cooking the books.
So basically, your choices here are commit statistical fraud or be labeled a racist. You choose. That's how Biden chose to deal with the local schools. This is outrageous. It's crazy.
And Scott, there's a lot of school districts, I promise you, they're still doing it. They're still behaving like Joe Biden is president.
That's unbelievable. Tony Woodleaf is that voice you're hearing. He's a prolific author. You see him sometimes in the Wall Street Journal and the National Review and other publications. His day job is Senior Executive Vice President at the State Policy Network Center for Practical Federalism. Tony, I've got about 30 seconds. Give me an example of an attorney general or some state policymaker out there who's actually on top of this. Somebody who's doing the right thing by jumping on some of this fraud, jumping on some of this nonsense, and getting rid of it.
Well, I tell you, there's some states where they really try to get out front. You know, Texas, Florida, Indiana, they've all stepped out. You had a number of state attorneys general who opposed a lot of the policies and efforts to do the transgender stuff. The holding school lunches hostage, you might recall that. The Biden people tried to do that. And you had a number of Republican attorney general who tried to stop that. But there needs to be more. There needs to be a lot more. And that's our hope, is we'll see more state level action, because President Trump can't be expected to fix all this. It's the job of our local elected officials to get in the game.
All right, Tony Woodleaf, we'll have you back. Appreciate your inaugural appearance on the Scott Jennings Show. Thank you. All right, quick word from our friends at Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile delivers prioritized premium service on all 3 major U.S. networks. You will get the same or even better coverage from Patriot Mobile than you're getting right now. And Patriot Mobile actually shares your political values. When you pay your bill, you're fueling the Christian conservative cause with Patriot Mobile. Sign up with them today. I'm a customer. I love these guys. PatriotMobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code Scott. Get a free month of service. PatriotMobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Make the switch today. You will not regret it. You will feel good about it. Your phone will work great. Your values will be promoted. It's a win-win. We'll take a break. More to come when we return. Common sense for the American people after this.
Leaving the leftists saying hamina, hamina, hamina. Yeah, this is the Scott Jennings Show.
All right, rounding out the show today, still paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East, specifically Iran. The United States has sent a massive amount of military equipment, ships, planes, missiles, missile defense, tankers, you name it. We've got it in the region. Here to talk about it and give us an update on whether we're going to war is Rich Goldberg, senior advisor for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Now, I should note, Rich, you are sanctioned by Iran, so I guess that means you're doing something right. Thanks for joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What's going on? We've got the president talking to Iran. They had these talks, but it's a little opaque about what actually went down. Some of the rumoring and reporting is that Iran just can't quite satisfy the Trump administration. We keep sending more military equipment to the region. Where do you think we stand?
Well, these talks that we see, which are, I would characterize as something around a joke, because this regime doesn't really understand how to come forward with credible concessions. It would amount to just completely changing their nature, their regime, by giving up their entire nuclear program, their missile program, and pledging to stop sponsoring terrorism or persecuting its people. So the talks buy both sides time. For the Iranians, they think that they can pull a fast one on President Trump, turn him into Barack Obama, offer up some concessions that he can spin as a win, but that the president knows won't be anything credible. And also at the same time, stave off economic disaster, because they've got banks on the verge of collapse. And the only thing keeping them from collapsing right now is the narrative economic effect inside the market that maybe there will be a deal. They also are demoralizing the millions of people who came out into the streets and making sure that people don't come back out into the streets because they think the West has abandoned them. Now, for the president, this is buying him time for all of the forces that are moving into the region. When millions of people came to the streets and were being gunned down, and we think the number might stand at 50,000 being mass murdered in a single night all across Iran, the president was obviously postured for Venezuela, had just pulled off a spectacular operation taking Maduro, and needed carrier strike groups in the region and other firepower to mitigate the Iranian retaliation potential with their missiles and drones. And so he now has not one carrier strike group on station, but another on its way, still waiting to transit the Strait of Gibraltar, other destroyers in the region, a lot of fighter jets being flown in, and we assume a lot of air defense assets as well. And so in coming days, the president likely has the full alignment of the force posture that he wants, or at least that General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, wants, for whatever outcomes he wants to effect. And at that point, he'll have a decision to make. Have the Iranians provided him something real at the table, or is it time to finally close that door, bring the bottom out of their economy, and also potentially degrade all the threats that they continue to pose to the United States?
Something I'm a little worried about here is, well, not worried, but interested in, is that the UK is said to be blocking the Trump administration from using United Kingdom RAF bases for strikes on Iran. Do you believe that is true? Would the United Kingdom really deny us that kind of cooperation if we decide we need to take out the Iranian regime?
Well, it would be an outrageous move from what is supposed to be our closest strategic ally. And certainly the Brits have not held back in their disgust over what happened back in January, the mass murder in the streets, and understand the tremendous historic moment of the vulnerability of this regime right now to take out further their threats. They have an embassy on the ground. Their foreign office, their diplomats are sort of Obama-esque, if you will, in their view of the Islamic Republic, and they always self-deter themselves from any hostile action against Iran because they fear that their embassy will be overrun. Not a bad fear. I mean, it could happen. It happened to the United States, obviously, in 1979. It's happened to their embassy before. But, of course, this also is occurring in the backdrop of the president pulling his support for a horrific deal to give up control of a very strategic asset, the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, be able to have this strategic asset for the United States, for Great Britain, and for the alliance. And so you never know what's real, what's not real, whether this is Starmer's attempt to politically deflect from the president, pressuring him not to go forward with the Chagos deal, or if this is actually real.
That voice you're hearing is Rich Goldberg, a senior advisor for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Rich, I'll give you 5 seconds on this. Do you think we're going to attack Iran, yes or no?
I think the president already made his decision, and we are seeing it play out.
That's Rich Goldberg. I'm Scott Jennings. We're done for the day. Back in New York tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Common sense for the American people. See you Friday.